I'm the director of the Center for Medieval and Renaissance Studies at the University of Oklahoma. And I and Professor Sullivan and Anne-Marie Eckert co-run this series of talks. And this is our first time doing, our first semester doing it online, which obviously is being lots of fun. So I'm very happy to introduce Professor Joe Sullivan. He was an undergraduate at the United States Military Academy at West Point. His MA and PhD were both in medieval German literature and culture, and they both were from the University of Texas at Austin. Although Joe was trained narrowly as a specialist in the literature of 12th through 14th century Germany, since arriving at OU in 1999, he has evolved into a scholar with broad interests. Professor Sullivan has published widely on the tradition of the legendary king, King Arthur, and especially how those legends have manifested themselves in Arthurian stories and even in films, and especially in the countries and many cultures north of France and north of the Alps, from the High Middle Ages to the present. Professor Sullivan's major research over the last decade has been the editing of medieval Arthurian novels, or romances in the medieval terminology, and also the translation of those romances into English, making them accessible to both scholar experts, to scholar experts as well as students and members of the general public, mostly for the first time. He's published first of these a 13th century romance called Whigamore in 2015. And in the fall of 2021, he hopes the next one will appear, which is the 15th century Bavarian language Arthurian romance called Sir Ivan. Professor Sullivan is currently the Vice President of the North American branch of the International Arthurian Society, the major professional organization for scholars working on the tradition of King Arthur. At OU, Professor Sullivan teaches classes on and in the German language, on the culture of the European Middle Ages, and whenever he has a chance, on the tradition of King Arthur. He and I take turns. Mm-hmm. Tonight, however, Professor Sullivan will leave Arthur aside and take us on a special and very medieval journey, walking the medieval Camino de Santiago in the 21st century. Joe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joyce. Okay, so tonight, if you want to stay for the whole time, the talk actually goes about 90 minutes, but we record these. There's a backup, so if you want to cut out at any time, please feel free to do so. And I'll also kind of look up every once in a while, and if it looks like people are sleepy, we can kind of stop at whatever point. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 15 minutes, and then we're going to go into a slideshow. And in case you just came in, part of the slideshow are a lot of recordings that I made walking the Camino de Santiago, and the sound is great when I play it on my computer, but when it comes over Zoom, it can be a little bit hard to hear. So if you see a clip coming up, you might just want to turn up your volume. I usually find like wearing earphones actually makes it easier to hear also, but most of them are actually subtitled, especially if there are people in there who aren't speaking English. So that should help you out a little bit. Okay, so really quickly, of course, I'm going to be talking about the Camino de Santiago, this medieval pilgrimage route, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that pilgrimage is either a part or has been a part of many major world religions. And of course, for us, I think sitting here today, we all naturally would think of the Hajj, the pilgrimage that Muslims tried to take once in their life to Mecca in present-day Saudi Arabia. So that's probably just the best known example today. Okay, so for Christianity, the pilgrimage had a golden age, and that was in the Middle Ages. And the Camino is perhaps the third most important pilgrimage destination, or was, for medieval Christians. The others we can mention are Jerusalem, also Rome. Right behind the Camino de Santiago is Mount St. Michael, Mont Saint-Michel, which is off the coast of Brittany in France today. And all of us here are either native English speakers or very good English speakers, and we're familiar with Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. So every country in the Middle Ages had pilgrimage routes. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, the framework revolves among a group of pilgrims making a pilgrimage to Canterbury to the shrine of Thomas à Becket, who was murdered on the order of Henry II in the 12th century. So that's just one. Those are just a couple of examples. Okay, so the Camino de Santiago. It has a broad history from about the year 800 to the present, really. Its high point, however, was approximately between the years 1050 and 1400. And within that period of 350 years, the really heavily traveled times were, especially from the late 11th century, all through the 12th century, and I'll say a couple more things about the 12th century here in a minute, and into the first half of the 13th century. So sort of like about 1150 to about 1250, or excuse me, 1050 to about 1250 is truly the high points. Okay, so this period essentially falls into what historians usually term the High Middle Ages. And I just want to say a few things about that period then in which this pilgrimage route is embedded. This is perhaps, I think most medievalists would say, this is perhaps the most important time period for the formation of the way that we think today, how we act, our political institutions, how we look at the world, that kind of things. So I'm just going to mention a couple of the things that sort of happen at this time. And especially in the 12th century. So technology, there's a great explosion in this. This is the age of the cathedrals and the related castles. This is the age of some of the great architectural styles that are still important today. So Romanesque, and then when we get into the middle of the 12th century, also the Gothic, which is incredibly important, especially for us in university communities in the Midwest. OU, do I even need to say this, is essentially a neo-Gothic university. All our buildings, about 75% of the larger ones, are Gothic architecture. This was also a period with great advancements in agriculture. We have an expansion of European civilization, that is to say, outside the geographical confines of what is Europe. So, for example, we had the Crusades to the Near East, the Holy Lands, and this sees provincial Europeans getting outside of their culture really for the first time and being acquainted with a larger world, and then bringing those ideas, technology ideas, philosophy ideas, even religious ideas back home to Europe and enriching themselves. This is a period of the growth of knowledge. For example, I just mentioned the rediscovery of ancient knowledge and philosophers, Plato, and then when we get into the 12th and 13th centuries, Aristotle as well. We have the beginnings of capitalism in this time, and importantly, we also have urbanization. We only have small towns, very small cities before that in Europe, but as we enter the High Middle Ages, 11th and 12th century, we have the first great cities in Europe as well. In art and poetry, in literature, we had the beginnings really of our own modern literature. So for example, I work on Arthurian romance. This is the novel, and the novel really begins in this time as well, the same time that pilgrimage routes are starting. So Arthurian romance is the most popular form of these medieval novels, and at the heart of it, we have the fictional character of the knight who rides out alone. This is the knight errant and goes through all sorts of adventures. It's a road trip. And I would suggest to you there is absolutely no accident that pilgrimages, these great road trips, are popular at the same time that the road trip inside of literature becomes also possible. And Dr. Pesce, our Italian expert, is sitting there. And perhaps the greatest work of the Middle Ages, greatest work of literature is Dante's Divine Comedy. And the author takes a road trip, if you will, through hell and purgatory and heaven. And this is the time period also of these pilgrimages as well. So again, I don't think any serious medievalist would argue that, yeah, this is any kind of coincidence. Okay, and so why did people go on pilgrimages at that time? So within medieval Christianity, the goal was to, after your life was over, to get into heaven. And part of the theology held that good works, doing physical things would help you actually get there. So making a pilgrimage, doing something that was quite difficult, often dangerous, would be a major way to help you along the way. And people didn't do this for themselves. This was a group society. People thought about other people in the community probably more than we did today. So people would also often do this for other people that they love. For example, your mom and dad or have been deceased. You want to get them out of another invention of this time period, the High Middle Ages, which is purgatory. It's this little antechamber where most people go before they go to heaven. Doing good works for other people, like a pilgrimage, would lessen their time in purgatory. Yeah, your town might also send you as well. So a lot of people will go on pilgrimage and they'd be supported by other people. And along that route, you would pray for other people, their salvation, the economic well-being of your town as well. Okay, and so people went for religious reasons primarily, yeah? But part of this, I think, was also like the way we think about travel today. We do this to learn about ourselves and to have a great adventure. So going on a pilgrimage was, for a lot of people, the adventure of a lifetime, and some people would go ahead and do several of them. Okay, so I'm talking today about the Camino de Santiago and pilgrimage past and present. So why do people do pilgrimage routes like the Camino today? So I would say in like the very, very largest sense, they do it for spiritual reasons. I'm not necessarily, we shouldn't say they all do it for religious reasons. In fact, probably only maybe about, I would say about 20% of the people that that I met along the Camino were there, for example, because they were Christians and they thought this was a good work and they wanted to get closer to their faith. People go for lots of reasons, but mostly for the challenge to kind of learn something about themselves. They go for introspection, even if they don't go originally for introspection. That's what they're going to get out of it. And coming out of a year out of COVID, I think like a lot of like the looking in I did on myself when I was walking these routes is a lot like the kind of introspection that has come out of COVID as well. It's kind of like the positive thing I've taken out of all this quarantining, other than being able to go to lots and lots of talks all over the world over Zoom, which I'm actually kind of grateful for. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me talk a little bit about the history of the Camino de Santiago. And this is all legendary history. And it's interesting, but I don't think it would have been so important for medieval pilgrims. And it's really not so important for people today. Walking the pilgrimage route is really more about the experience and getting closer to whatever you want to get closer to, God or yourself or whatever. Okay, so just really quickly, this is the legend behind it. So Santiago, this is one of the ways in Spanish to say Saint James. He was the fourth apostle of Jesus Christ. He made his way to Iberia, kind of as a missionary. Iberia, we're talking about Spain and present-day Portugal. He returned to the Holy Land after that, where he was beheaded by the Jewish king Herod. Followers smuggled his body back to the Iberian Galicia and back to the Iberian Peninsula, and indeed to the area called Galicia, where the present city of Santiago de Compostela is located. And this is if you have a map in your head, I'll show you a map in a minute, but this is the area of Spain that sits right to the north of Portugal. Yeah, it's kind of sits across from the British Isles, if you will. Okay, so we have an 800-year silence after the time he is supposed to have died. And then in the year 813, according to the legend, a hermit discovers his grave. And then the word gets out, and then very, very slowly over the next 100, 200 years, people start making a pilgrimage to pray at his grave. Part of the legend, okay, so just really quickly, most of you already know this, but the Iberian Peninsula in the Middle Ages was home to people of different faith groups, Jews, Muslims, and Christians. And just like everywhere in Europe in the Middle Ages, people fought against themselves in little groups and little areas and stuff like that. Okay, so according to the legend, there was a Muslim army fighting a Christian army, and in the year 852, St. James miraculously appeared during this fight, and help the Christians defeat the Muslims. Yeah. Okay, so that's the year 852. We had to wait about 2 centuries, however, for like the true deluge of pilgrims to really start using this route. Yes, we're talking about 1050. And why is that? I would just suggest to you, it really has to do probably more than anything else with economic conditions. The year 1000 is not like a market, say Zora, in time in the Middle Ages, but things really do change in Europe about the year 1000. People all of a sudden, like over the course of just a few decades, have a whole lot more wealth. There's generally more security, that type of thing. So there's no accident that this pilgrimage route and a lot of others start to flourish in the 11th century. Okay, so it goes strong for a couple of centuries, but the popularity of doing this pilgrimage is eventually going to decline. It's going to peter out, especially after about the year 1400. And I don't think we can name any one particular reason for this, but I'm just going to suggest a couple of them. So medieval society is really a group society. It discovers the importance of the individual, that the individual has rights and feelings and everything else, but it's really a corporate society. And they did a lot of things in groups. But as we go through the centuries, we get it closer to 1500 and 1600 and stuff like that, the appeal of doing things in groups, kind of like the appeal of mass movements, really starts to decline in some ways. And also just kind of the way religious medieval Christians worship, it changes a little bit as well. They still go to services and do things together, but a lot of the worship becomes more interior too. So, you could praise God and commune with God and the saints, also kind of staying at home and looking inward with yourself. Okay, so another development, and it's also kind of a phenomenon too of getting away from kind of like mass movements and a little bit more individual belief, is the Reformation. And the Reformations in Europe, they really take off about the year 1500. And of course, we know Martin Luther as probably the most important Protestant reformer. So especially for Luther, and people are very, very important, as we've learned, I think, over the past decade in history. What an individual believes can change everything. So as Martin Luther is the most important voice in the Reformation, his idea towards good works is the thing that kind of put, I think, that really kind of a nail in the coffin of things like pilgrimages. So Martin Luther was, of course, a Catholic monk, and he really took seriously this idea of saving his soul. And he kind of tried everything that was available to him in Catholic Christianity. And he, at least for him, he found that pilgrimages and doing good works, things like that, just didn't seem to get him into salvation. So his theology was that good works aren't going to get you there. It's all just about belief, your belief in God and the scriptures and stuff like that. Okay, so half of Europe between about 1500 and 1600 becomes Protestant. Those people are not going to be going on pilgrimages anymore. And also within medieval Catholicism, there's also a movement to kind of go inward and not do so many outward things, not build so many things, commission so much art, that kind of thing. So those are all good works. So we just have a general decline in that. Okay, so it kind of goes away. So the Camino de Santiago, pilgrimage along it, never really goes away completely. But when we get into like the 17th and 18th century, we might only have 50 people actually walking it a year. And the 19th century too. But it never goes away. People are still doing it. So obviously I'm giving this talk today because it's come back. And this has really happened over about the past 40 years. Okay, so one signal event for the Camino de Santiago was in 1990, and the then Pope, this was John Paul II, he walked a portion of the Camino de Santiago. And of course, that got broadcast all over the world. And especially after that, the numbers just picked up. They probably tripled, something like that. The other thing I would point to also is, and I'm no expert on this, but is what the Spanish government made a real concerted effort to rehabilitate this route after about World War II, so this is over the past 75 years. So what did they do? They put in footpaths, for example, all through the major routes. They instituted policies for people to be able to run little pilgrim hotels. We call them hostels or albergues in Spanish today, where the owners, I think they're probably mostly tax-free. And they also rehabilitated, they restored so many of the beautiful buildings along this route. And I'll probably say this a couple of times, but I think that Spain is probably like the country par excellence for seeing medieval architecture in general. So again, I really haven't checked this out, but my feeling is most of the restorations of the buildings, the medieval buildings, occurred after World War II. Other places in Europe like France and Germany, the restorations were in the 19th century. And although they were state of the art in the time that they were done, people took a lot of shortcuts in the 19th century and rebuilt the way things the way they thought they should look. The rebuildings in Spain, the restorations are conservative and lovingly done. So again, this is a place to go, I think, for get a really good feeling of like the authentic Middle Ages. Okay, so what else? Okay, so yeah, so the Camino has made this experience really kind of popular and beloved. I hope to inspire some of you today to think about going along this route. What I would suggest to you also, you're mostly people I know and have seen before, and a lot of people are actually in my age as well. I'm going to show it to you as a walker does it, but there are many ways to see the Camino. You do not have to walk it. You can also just walk portions of it. So at the far extreme ends of things, you can sign up with a tour company and they'll provide the transportation for you and take you to all the sites. It is the authentic experience. You can also do a hybrid kind of thing where you walk through some portions of it and then you take like public transportation in between towns. And then when people are especially young and a little bit older too, sometimes people's knees aren't as good as they could be. And the only really challenging thing about walking through these regions is in some places the elevations can be pretty severe. You can also always just take a taxi or a cab and skip that day. Yeah. So it's open to everybody. And if you're like a real sports fan, people can bike it. You can also ride a horse. There are lots of ways to see it. So it's worth seeing it no matter how you do it. It's going to be very inexpensive. Spain is an inexpensive country in general in Europe. This area of Spain is rural for the most part. It's a really inexpensive trip. Okay, what else should I say? Okay, so just to get your feet wet too, the little talk tonight will give you, I think, a pretty good idea of what it's like to go along the route. However, I would recommend a film. This is a Hollywood movie, kind of an art house movie. It's a 2010 movie with Martin Sheen and his son Emilio Estevez, and it's called The Way. So almost everybody who walks the Camino de Santiago has seen this film. And like my wife, my wife didn't know this, but I allowed her to see this movie, hoping she would fall in love with the idea of going. And then she did. So all the Spaniards that I talked to me about this movie. They thought it was the silliest movie in the world because it's really the experience of people who are not Spanish or Portuguese. But I tell you, it's not silly. It's actually kind of the feeling you meet characters like that. I think it captures the experience really, really well. So it's a good preparation if you're thinking about going. Okay, so what else? So I'll mention this too. So the Camino has been the thing that's generated a lot of interest in doing pilgrimages across Europe. I don't think it's inspired any in the Americas yet, but I bet I'm wrong. So in Europe, a lot of people who did the Camino went back home and worked to reinvigorate pilgrimage routes in their own country. So I didn't do this, but I wanted to do this a few years ago. I wanted to do the one that was reinvigorated in Sweden, in Norway. This is Saint Olaf's Way. There is a pilgrimage route that goes through all of Italy. And I was going to go through the part that goes through Sicily. It's just been reinvigorated in the past 5 years. It goes through the middle of the island. It would be so cool. I was going to do that last summer in 2019, but we all know what happened. So I'm hoping I can do that next summer. I was thinking about this summer, but yes, Roberto, yes, we know this. So European Union and Italy is not doing very well at the vaccine distribution. But yeah, so these routes are starting again all over Europe. And of course, since we're all English speakers here, I'll just mention Canterbury. So that route's been reinvigorated too. I think that's about a week-long hike, if you will. Okay, so we're going to go now into a slideshow. I have it cut into a couple of PowerPoints for you all. And this is not really important, but just in case you're interested, I actually did the Camino in 2 stages. So if you were to walk the whole thing, I can't remember. I'm not just saying this. Like for me, it's actually just the walking. I didn't care about the destination. I never do. It would probably, I think it takes about 2 months to walk if you walk about 12 miles a day, which is all anybody, no matter how good shape you're in, should really try to do. So most people don't really have time to do it all at once, unless you're a college student. It's perfect. But so I did it over 2 summers. The first summer I walked the half that's closer to the destination that takes you into Santiago de Compostela, and I did that with my wife. And it seems like it was yesterday, but it was actually 2015. And then I decided I would actually give a talk for the medieval fair, and I decided I needed to actually get some more movies, and it was an excuse to go back. So I went back the second summer by myself, which is a whole different story. This was 2016, and I walked the first half of the route in Spain, from the French border to kind of like the middle of the route. And that was 2016. So most of the clips we're going to see are actually ones I made in 2016 that were developed for this talk. And of course, this talk is just a reprisal. We're just doing like greatest hits of a few years ago in COVID times. Okay, so it's going to take about an hour to go through the slideshows. Again, you might want to turn up the volume on the little movies. They just don't come off that well over Zoom. And please feel free to leave whenever you want to. If you don't want to hang on for the whole time, we record these and upload them as well. And Joyce will kind of tap me out if people look like they're sleepy, I'm sure. Okay, so give me a second and I'm going to get the slideshow up for you guys. Okay. And okay, I'm just moving you guys around so you don't have to look at yourselves. And can I get a thumbs up if you can see can you all see the slide? Okay. An appropriate place, I think. Hi, I'd like to welcome you today to our exploration of the Way of St. James, the Camino de Santiago. And I am starting an appropriate place, I think, not exactly in Spain. So if you look behind me, you will notice something carved into a tree. You see a typical sign for the Way of St. James. It's a conch shell in yellow on a blue background, and that's how we know that we're actually properly on the way and that we're going in the right direction. And if you look over to the side, you can see also something that's very typical for these way postings, and that in fact is a distance to the ultimate destination, Santiago de Compostela in Spain. And the distance carved into this tree is 2,454 kilometers. And if you do the math, if you know the metric system, that's approximately, let's see, about 1,500 miles. Obviously, we are not in Spain. In fact, we're in the beautiful German city of Leipzig, which is in the center of Germany. And it's a cold day. It is the beginning of July, 2 days past our own American Independence Day. And I said a minute ago, this is a very appropriate place to start, and indeed it is. In the Middle Ages, people came from all over Europe, from as far as Scandinavia, all over Germany, from all points. And we are, in fact, on one of the tributary roads that feeds into several of the roads that actually go eventually into Spain. Leipzig, which is in the east of Germany, was on one of the main trade routes during the Middle Ages, called the Via Regia, or that's Latin for something like the King's Road. And it was the principal economic street or path leading through the Holy Roman Empire, what we would call the German Empire, I guess, into Kiev, and one of the richest cities in the world. So people coming, for example, from Russia, maybe from farther north, from the Baltic countries like Lithuania or present-day Latvia, or even Scandinavia, many of them would have started here. And in fact, we even find people who will do that today. Yeah, okay, so, sorry. Whoops. Okay, yeah, and then that is true. In fact, and we'll meet a couple of people in the slideshow as well. People, you run into people who have come from France, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, all that. Okay, so we're looking at a map here right now, and all the little roads on there, these are all pilgrimage routes, medieval pilgrimage routes that ultimately feed into the Camino. And they would have also been commercial routes at the time also. So yeah, so go ahead and take a look down at what's today Spain as well. And you're going to see a red road that's going across the top of Spain. And that is the major Camino road. It's called the French way, like the Camino Francesa. Today, but you can see there are a bunch of other roads also in Spain. So the point is, you could in the Middle Ages, and you can also today start at a lot of other different destinations in Spain, also in Portugal to get to Santiago. And although they aren't as heavily traveled as this main way, the French way, they nevertheless have facilities for pilgrims, and they're totally civilized. You can follow one of them. Okay, so let's go forward a little bit. So the last summer that I went, I was in Germany with a group of students, and while they were in class, I went out and trained. And so if you are planning on walking this route, yeah, of course, the best thing to do is actually just to do a lot of walking. And the place where I was is Leipzig. They have really beautiful parks. And once again, lots of people do these pilgrimages these days, and all through the forest in Leipzig, there were these signs. Yeah, it's the blue sign with the yellow shell. I guess it's not a conch shell, it's like a shallot. Okay, so here we are again. Yes, a couple different trees with that sign. And I think the last place I went before the lockdown was the British Isles. And we were in Shropshire. And I actually saw a bunch of these signs out in the fields in Shropshire as well. So there are Camino fans everywhere. And they're more than just fans. I mean, people actually will walk from a place like Shropshire in England to the Camino as well. Yeah. Okay, so just really quickly, typically I would give a lot of tips for what to take along with you, but I'm just going to speed through these. But needless to say, if you are going to be walking this path, you want to be properly equipped. And essentially, just like in the Middle Ages, you are more or less just outfitting yourself as a backpacker. You want to be kind of comfortable. So when you walk, you might have 10 or 12 pounds of stuff in the summer. Basically nothing. I carry more to my classes and papers and things like that. So that's what I took last time I went. That's a king size bed. It fit in a small backpack. Yeah. Okay. And these are just a couple of pictures of shoes. This is the major equipment in the Middle Ages and today. You would think about it if you were a pilgrim. In the Middle Ages, just in the Spanish portion of the walk, people would have traded out their shoes maybe about 3 times. Yeah. So I have a little question here. Do you want to take really great hiking shoes on the left or lighter weight shoes on the right? And the answer is lighter weight shoes on the right. Okay, so that's neither here or there. None of us are going to Europe this summer, but the lighter weight shoes I would bring something up with them. This is a very, very civilized route in some ways. This is not backcountry hiking. Yeah, you're walking, but this is not the Appalachian Trail. Most of the surfaces are paths that have been all tidied up by the Spanish government. Yeah, they go through beautiful places. They go through the countryside. They go through woods and stuff like that. But you know, there aren't a whole lot of like really rocky or muddy surfaces, anything like that. Yeah, lots of difficult elevations, but besides that, it's pretty civilized. And all along the route as well, there are places that you can stop. You can't go 2 miles without coming to a really great cafe, a place to grab like a coffee and have a chat with other people. Okay, and this is what I looked like walking the Camino, and this is what most of the people look like too. We just look like hikers. Yep. And you'll notice how short my hair is too. So it's kind of hot in Spain. It's in the summertime, like 85 degrees. So that kind of helps. Okay, so this is what a medieval pilgrim would have looked like. And you can see these pilgrims are specifically on the Camino de Santiago. And we know that by the little shell that they're wearing. And yeah, this is also kind of really representative of medieval pilgrims. So this is a walking stick, which is a great idea. And up at the top, that's something like a gourd, and that's your canteen for drinking lots of water. And every once in a while today, you'll run into people who want to be very authentic. Yeah. So this is a little bit of like Society for Creative Anachronism. Some people want to get as close to the real thing as possible. So here we have a modern day pilgrim in medieval garb. And of course, he's made the one exception for our great modern footwear. He's wearing some hiking sandals there as well. And I have no idea, but my bet would be, you know, people who made pilgrimages and made them today and do it in traditional garb, that traditional garb usually works really, really well for the conditions. So I can bet you anything that he's actually pretty comfortable under all that stuff. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys where I started, and we're going to go through in some of these clips kind of through a typical day. I've patched it together over several days, but what a typical day among the Camino might be like. I'm going to start out at the French border, which is right here, just like 5 miles over on the French side. And then we're going to walk from east to west, like most people do along the Camino. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys a clip from where I started. And again, you might want to turn up your sound a little bit. This one's in English, so I didn't subtitle it. It's about 3 weeks since I last checked in with you, and we are no longer in Germany. We are in another land that belongs to the Camino. And in fact, we're now in France. We are on the border, the traditional start place of people going into Spain. The town of France is called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. It's very picturesque. You can see it in the background. Pied-de-Port means the foot of the gate. So this was the traditional pass, the most safe pass to go from France into Spain, both in the Roman period and also later in the Middle Ages. And today it's the favorite entrance port for many pilgrims doing the Camino in Spain. So I will check in with you all again soon. Okay, and if you look at the right arrow over in the upper, excuse me, the yellow arrow in the upper right hand, that's right. That's where I was just speaking from. So that's on the French side of the border. So what we're going to do now, we're going to do probably the most challenging part of the Camino for many people. In the Middle Ages and today, we are going to go across the mountains, and these are the Pyrenees mountains. And this area on both sides of the border, this is, just in case you're interested, this is Basque country. Yeah. So Basque is a non-European language. It's probably the oldest language in Europe. I went through a lot of towns in Basque country, and I hate to say that it doesn't really seem like the language is being spoken even in those small places. So, okay. Okay, so again, we're at the beginning of the trail, and there's a typical sign, that the yellow and the blue signs, and it is pointing. And So we're going to go up in elevation, and I'm just guessing. I mean, you probably go up maybe 150 stories. It's quite a climb, and especially for the first day for so many people on the trail, it's incredibly challenging. So this is a good one to actually take a bus around the pass if you don't want to be all worn out on the first day. And this is just to give you an idea of the countryside, just quite beautiful. Okay, so this is the pass from France into Spain. And we are going to end up in this town. And for people who work on the Middle Ages, everybody knows this town. So in French, this is called Roncevaux, and in Spanish, this is Roncesvalles. And this was a very important town for people in the High Middle Ages for what it symbolized. So at least in what we'll say legend, in the popular understanding in the Middle Ages, Charlemagne, yeah, so he was king about the year 800, fought a battle here against the Muslims from Spain, the Moors, and was essentially in the end, he was more or less triumphant. Um, Actually, we don't think that there was ever a battle fought exactly here. It was several miles away, but this became an important place, and it's really the first important place in Spain along the Camino de Santiago. So that means a lot of things were built there. Okay, so just really, really quickly, I'm not going to show you too many pictures of buildings, but the Camino de Santiago is a great place to look at some of the more important architectural styles from the High Middle Ages. So we see two styles. The first is Romanesque, and this is the earlier style. It is like the style until about 1150. Never really goes away, but it's going to lose out the Gothic. And just really quickly, we know it's a Romanesque building when we see rounded arches. We see, and it looks like it's built from children's old wooden blocks. So lots of geometric shapes like cubes and spheres and things like that. Generally, it seems kind of like a heavy style and a massive style, a really sturdy style as well. Absolutely beautiful as well, but it will lose out. It will not be cutting edge by about 1150, 1170, 1180, when another style comes in. Coming out of France, everything comes out of France in these days, and that's the Gothic style. So this is in that same place, Roncesvalles, and this is the interior of a church that was right next door to the last building I showed you. And just really quickly, so Gothic architecture, we know this so well from some of the churches around Campus Corner, like the Methodist Church and the Episcopal Church, and also from all the buildings on campus. Yeah, so we have pointed arches, and we see those back here over at the altar and the stained glass windows. And also here we have cross rib vaulting. So if you look up at the ceiling, we have what looks like the skeleton of a whale holding everything up. We have very thin pillars, and all this serves to make something of a skeleton out of stone for glass windows. So we have lots of light, and specifically stained glass light. So these spaces are infused with like twilight lights of blues and reds and greens and stuff like that today. So we see those all over the place. So why is the Camino like the best place in the world to see both these kinds of architecture? Okay, so you can see great examples of medieval architecture all through Europe, but usually for like a larger building in medieval Europe, it would take several generations to put it up. So a cathedral in a major city, for example, in Germany, it might have taken 100 to 125 years to complete it. So essentially, like money would run out, something would intervene. They'd have to wait for like a really like a bishop to come along who was good with finances. They'd build some more, and they would keep on doing that. Pilgrimage routes, however, people went on them for religious reasons, but they became economic hubs as well. So the pilgrims, when they came in to stay places, they would make donations. When they came to the churches, they would make donations also. So a lot of these buildings went up very, very quickly. For example, within about 25 years for a whole cathedral, lots of places like that among the Camino de Santiago. This is kind of cool in some ways because you can go to some of these buildings and they're like an architectural period frozen in time. So if it's built between 1175 and 1200, you're going to see all the things that were in vogue about that time. And also all the different religious orders. So in Catholicism, there were many, many different orders. Yeah. And they would all find institutions along the route to be part of this. And these institutions would kind of like advertise them as well. You know, we show great hospitality, we show great architecture that says something about our order as well. So they took a lot of care putting these buildings together as well. Okay, so let's move a little bit forward, Chip. All right, so the first two states, if you will, these are autonomous regions in Spain that we're going to go through. We're going to start in Basque country, and we're going to go through a state called Navarra. And the second state is going to be La Rioja, and that's going to be wine country. Okay, so we're starting again here. Okay, and I'm going to give you guys the beginnings of a typical day. And this is in Navarra.
Buenas tardes de Viana in Navarra. Good afternoon from the town of Viana in Navarre. And I thought I would put together what is a typical day. And I'll probably patch together a few days, but we'll go about 24 hours. And right now it's 4:45 in the afternoon. I'm in a town of about 4,000 people, perhaps a little bit smaller than that. But anyway, it's the middle of the day. And you can take a look around here, and I'm on the walls of the town, and we'll just look behind. Down below me, there is a major highway, and as you can probably notice, there's absolutely nothing going on. So in Spain, at least in most of the places that are major cities, the siesta is still very much observed in the afternoon. And from about 2 o'clock to about 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, it's dead. It's totally quiet. You can still get a beer or a glass of wine, but everything else is about closed. So I'll go ahead and sign off for right now.
Okay, so yeah, so most pilgrims, especially in the warmer months, they'll start hiking at dawn, and they might actually walk until about 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they fall into kind of the way of the locals, and they take a little siesta. So here are some church ruins in that same town, and we have a couple of the pilgrims there. So this is what most people do. They just like lie around in the afternoon and until they cool out because they're exhausted. It's kind of nice. For myself, I'm one of those people who's like always caffeinated. So I didn't want to do this. This is when I actually went out and look at all the historical sites. So one of the really gratifying, cool things about doing this as a medievalist is I actually knew a lot about what I was looking at. So yeah, I'm a specialist. I'm a literature specialist. I specialize on one narrow kind of medieval literature, but like most of us, I'm also kind of a generalist, and I know a little bit of history. I know a little about architecture and stuff like that. So yeah, there's just so much to see. And the other thing that was really kind of nice also was that you make lots of friends, and you see people just standing around looking at things. And I was able to explain people what they were looking at. Yeah, so that was kind of fun. And they usually appreciated it too. So yeah, okay. So we're gonna go on here a little bit. And I'm gonna show you a few clips of just walking kind of by myself. And the sound again over Zoom is not so great, but you would be able to hear the water kind of like brookling on the side of the road and the wind and everything else. And you might be able to hear that if you turn it up, but this is what a lot of the experience of actually walking this is. It allows for introspection. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I think this is actually a continuation of that same road. So the next couple of slides are going to give you an idea of what it's like to come up into a Camino town and to go through it, what's in it, and what it might be like when you come out of it. And they're all different, but about 80% of the towns among the route kind of have a similar layout. Yeah. So usually there's like one main street, and you see that coming into the town, and from a mile away, you can see the major buildings, the church or whatever. Okay, so here we're approaching a town. And then, yeah, so we usually have one main street in most of these towns. That is, unless it's a bigger city. Anything under a few thousand people is going to be like this. So one main street, and it's running east to west. All roads point to Santiago de Compostela. Okay, this is a different town. Okay, so this is a town called Puente la Reina. It means something like the Queen's Bridge. Yeah, so this looks very medieval. I mean, these buildings are probably not medieval, but they're on the medieval footprint. Yeah, so buildings kind of crowding in on either side of you. Okay, so what might some of those buildings be? Okay, so here, of course, we have a church. I'll say a couple words about that in a second. Yeah, so the religious places of worship are going to be the centerpieces, of course. But you're also going to have all the businesses that cater to the pilgrims, and this is medieval and also today. And then the second word there is hospitals. And you can see I put parentheses around the middle of the word. So these words are actually related, and even in English, to each other. So hostels, these are, if you will, these were the inns, the hotels, if you will. And yeah, in the Middle Ages, they were like hospitals too. You would have your needs cared for you if you were sick as well. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So in English today, if you're a pilgrim today, we usually use the word hostel, but the word in Spanish is albergue, and all the pilgrims from the other countries, we start saying albergue after a few days. Yeah. Okay. And this church is just kind of interesting. Again, I'm not going to show you too many pictures of churches, but in a lot of ways, this is very typical of the type of religious building you're going to see. So yeah, so once again, medieval Iberia has influences of Jews, but most importantly, Muslim influences and Christian influences that come together. So here we have a Christian church, but if you take a look right above the door, you see something that you're not going to see in Christian architecture in like France or Germany or England, something like that. And this looks very definitely North African or Moorish, and it's no accident, right? So these people were living next to each other. They were trading artisans. The best artisans are just going to go to the person who pays the best. So in so many of these great Christian churches, you have these really, really fantastic Moorish influences, either more or less. This is not that much. Sometimes there's just tons of it there, and they're just really, really cool. Okay, so we're leaving that same town right now, and we're actually going to go over the bridge after which the town is named. Yeah, so we're coming out the west here, and I just showed this because this is you actually see a lot of really great bridges when you're walking the Camino. So when this route becomes popular for the first time, and this is in the late 11th century, it also caused the local rulers to do major building projects. I think this one is named after, it's actually who was the woman who was the Queen of Navarra at the time. Yeah, so lots of pretty original medieval bridges. Okay, so I'm going to show you some clips of some people I met along the way here, and for me too. So I'm in the Department of Modern Languages, as you know. So German is my language, but I love the Camino because there are people from all over the world, and I get to play with like languages that I use only as reading languages and try to experiment with them. So if the sound's not too good, but you can kind of hear me struggling, and some things that are related to things that I work on that I never, ever speak. But yeah, this is the Camino. You fall into conversations with people all the time, and they let you play with like their languages. And I'll just say a word about this too. So English is a lingua franca. You can get by on that, no problem on the Camino. English is not as widely spoken as I think most people from outside a place like Spain would actually expect in rural areas of Spain. I was really surprised So I was really happy that I was able to fall back on my Spanish from high school, which I had only used in like one vacation, one time. I never got to use it, and it takes a few days, but you know, Spanish education in high schools is pretty good in the United States. And I found that out quickly. So, you know, after a week, it started coming back to me. And if you've traveled anywhere in the world, you know that Americans and English speakers in general, the Brits are the worst, have a well-deserved reputation as only being able to speak English. But in the United States, we do a good job. We do a pretty good job of Spanish. So I can't tell you how many Spanish native people I ran into over there who told me how well Americans speak Spanish. They said nobody else could, but Americans were actually pretty good. So it's kind of nice. And the people are very, very friendly. Spaniards in general, really friendly people, welcoming. They're not quite as effusive. Roberto is still there as Italians, for example, but actually really warm people. And most of them, the people along the route, a lot of them make their money from the pilgrims. I would say about 90% of them are really appreciative of the pilgrims. You know, we're all very respectful visitors. You don't get a lot of rowdy pilgrims. Yeah, even though there are a lot of younger people that do this. But you know, and most of the Spaniards are grateful for this. You do run into about 10% that have had just about too much of pilgrims, and they're not happy with them. But it's actually pretty rare. Okay, so yeah, here are some folks I met.
Okay, so I thought I would embarrass a couple people that I've met on the Camino, and I'm going to ask them just why they're doing it. En wij kunnen beginnen met ALDO. ALDO, waarvan kom je?
Ik kom uit Nederland, uit het noorden van Nederland, vlakbij Friesland.
Dankjewel. En waar heb je begonnen?
Ik ben thuis begonnen met mijn Camino. En ik heb nu al 2.500 kilometer gelopen in 4 maanden.
Dat is heel lang. Heel lang. Waarom mag je het Camino? Ja, Jacobsweg in het Nederlands?
Ja. Ik doe de Camino omdat ik heel veel heb gewerkt. En ik wil graag wat tijd voor mezelf. Ik wil wat nadenken over dingen die in mijn leven zijn gebeurd. En ik wil graag veel andere mensen leren kennen uit verschillende landen.
Omdat het hard doe wordt waarschijnlijk gemaakt. Ja. Oké. And I haven't even introduced you guys know my name is Joe. Okay.
Hi, Joe.
And what's your name?
Stephanie.
Stephanie. Stephanie, where are you from?
I am from the United States, San Francisco.
Okay. And why are you doing the Camino?
I started the Camino because I thought it would just be a lot of fun and a good challenge physically, mentally, and it has been.
Has it been totally fun?
It actually has been a lot of fun. There's a lot of pain involved, but the fun really does outweigh the pain.
Okay. Great. Okay. So thank you guys. Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And
De nada.
dankjewel, Aldo.
Graag gedaan.
Okay, so I'm going to flip over to another slideshow here. It was such a large file that I had to divide it in two. Okay, so can you all hear okay? Yeah, more or less? Okay. Okay, so just give me a second here. Okay, can you all see that? Yeah, okay. So just really quickly too, so those are the first two pilgrims that we met. And you can see sometimes people have really, really hurting feet, especially at the beginning of if they've just started the Camino. So everybody gets over it, but sometimes people have kind of a miserable first week, but after that they settle into it. And people who are doing this, they're kind of happy. You know, it's like you walk through a door, you walk out of your regular life and you're in a different space. And it's a really good space for people too. And I kind of imagine that for a lot of people doing medieval pilgrimages, they might have had kind of a similar experience to this as well. So again, I hope that some of you might think of actually undertaking a trip like this. Like myself, I'm an academic. I'm really incredibly shy. I'm the kind of person who will like run across the street to avoid actually talking to somebody I know for real. But I think people like me, you know, we kind of open up when we do something like this. And you really experience people at their best in some ways. You know, people leave a lot of we all have bad things, and people leave a lot of those bad habits at home. So for this is like my interactions with my students. I'm always grateful for my students because I hardly ever see any of the bad parts of their personalities other than procrastination. It's mostly good things. So it's kind of similar to this in some ways. Okay, so we're gonna resume our typical day on the Camino. If I can get my cursor down here.
Morning again. We got a nice early start today. So we are on our way. It's the sun just is starting to come up now. The city is in the background. It's supposed to be a real scorcher again today. You might not want to hike this in August. So we are well on our way to the next place.
Okay, so yeah, I told you guys like the one time I did this I did half of it on my own. So it can be a very individual experience. And again, if you would think about going here, this is a great trip for either in a group or as a single person. So if you're single, it's like automatically having friends. You know, you fall in with people, you see the same people over and over again. You might not see them for 5 days and you'll see them one more time. It's kind of like instant social groups in some ways. And it's a safe trip also for people who sometimes feel, you know, in danger when you're in the city or something like that. Okay, so yeah, I did it one time as an individual. But I wanted to throw the question too, and I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that a lot of professional medievalists consider the High Middle Ages as, you know, when the pilgrimages were most in vogue, to be also the time that our society, Western civilization, really makes the individual a thing, you know, something important. Yeah, it's still about the group, corporate society, the welfare of everybody. But all of a sudden, especially as we get into the 12th century, it's also okay to care about yourself, your own salvation, for instance, also your rights and privileges, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So the question, yeah. So it's a medieval pilgrimage. Was it about like individual experience, or was it really about the group, like the group you hung out with, doing things for the group you went on pilgrimage for? And the answer to that, both then and today, is that it's both things at the same time. So this next image, the individuals in these circles are the pilgrims going to the Canterbury shrine of Thomas a Becket. And this is actually from the most well-known, beautiful manuscript of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Again, the framework for that was people telling stories along the way when they're going on pilgrimage. And I could ask for a show of hands to ask who has read a little bit of this, and most people have. But I would also say, so that's like the group experience. You know, you fall in with people and you share tales. This is what happens today as well. Yeah. So even the shy people, we go and you run into people and you end up having conversations with them that you would never have as a tourist anywhere else. Yeah. So I'm a Germanist. Germans are really pretty nice people. They're very polite. Unless you speak their language and know them for a little while, it's never going to go beyond pleasantries. Yeah. The Camino, you can talk to anybody. Yeah, that's what it's there for. So even today, you know, you're trading stories with people from Korea, Japan, Brazil, wherever they're from. You're learning a lot about the world. in the medieval period as well, and this is not my idea, this was kind of like a favorite hobby horse of medieval scholars like in the 30s and 40s, that people traded all sorts of information along these pilgrimage routes. And I don't know where, it went out of vogue like way before I even got into academia. I'm going to say the 70s or 80s, that people were like telling stories and taking those stories home and translating them into their own languages and stuff. But practical experience tells me that probably happened quite a bit. Yeah, so we tell each other stories, even like made up fictional stories, and people are going to bring them home and do their own thing with them. Yeah, okay. All right, so another clip.
Buenos dias. Good morning. It's just a few minutes later, and today I'm crossing over the boundary between two of the autonomous regions, the states from Navarra into La Rioja. And La Rioja, wine lovers among you know, is Spain's premier wine growing region, and some of the best wine in the world. And we had a nice sunrise here, and I just wanted you all to see the vines. So the morning is, in some ways, the best time to walk. There really is the most to see. So you don't want to sleep too late on whenever you are feeling like it.
Yeah, so for me, this is a lot like Oklahoma. So everybody was complaining about the heat, but 85 degrees, that's nothing for us.
Also, es ist 2 Uhr Nachmittag und wir sind in einem Dorf und das Dorf heißt Aches. Und also wir haben ein kleines Problem. Wir sprechen so viele Sprachen, wir haben Probleme also mit verschiedenen Sprachen, aber jetzt sind wir im Deutschen. Ja, und also darf ich fragen, wie heißt du?
Ich heiße Charlotte.
Hallo Charlotte.
Hi.
Und Charlotte, woher kommst du?
Ich komme aus Dortmund in Deutschland.
Aus Dortmund, ja. Also ich kenne das Bier gut, ja? Okay.
Ja, obwohl mein Lieblingsbier ist Spanisch.
Spanisch und welches spanisches Bier?
Estrella.
Estrella,
Das ist mein Lieblingsbier, obwohl ich Deutsche bin.
Ne, alles klar. Das Bier schmeckt mir deutsch. Und also ich wollte auch fragen, also warum magst du den Jakobsweg?
Der Jakobsweg ist für mich eine Möglichkeit, ich selbst zu sein. Außerhalb des Jakobsweges verfolge ich meine Mission. Da arbeite ich, da folge ich meinem Weg, um etwas in dieser Welt zu verändern. Aber auf dem Jakobsweg, das mache ich einmal im Jahr für 3 Wochen mindestens.
Oh, wirklich?
Ja, zumindest seit letztem Jahr.
Oh, alles klar,
ich denke mal, die nächsten Jahrzehnte wird das weitergehen, weil das ist die Möglichkeit, ich selbst zu sein. Und immer wieder mich daran zu erinnern, wer ich eigentlich wirklich bin.
Alles klar, mindestens einmal im Jahr.
Ja, erinnern, wer ich wirklich bin.
Mhm.
Auf dem Jakobsweg sagen wir manchmal ganz gerne, ich verlasse die Matrix, um mich selbst zu sein, die Wahrheit zu erkennen. Aber ich habe eine Aufgabe. Ich habe eine Aufgabe in der Matrix.
Die Welt zu verändern, ja? So
oder zumindest in meinem Umkreis, was ich kann. Nicht die ganze Welt, aber mein kleiner Teil der Weltveränderung damit beizutragen.
Alles klar, sehr schön. Und vielleicht sehen wir uns noch einmal also auf dem Jakobsweg, ja?
Wirst du auf den Jakobsweg wieder gehen?
Also wahrscheinlich, ja?
Das ist möglich, dann ist es möglich.
Irgendwie und irgendwann.
Wenn wir Teile sind des Jakobswegs, dann,
ja.
Dann arbeiten wir für den Jakobsweg, auf dem Jakobsweg und der Jakobsweg arbeitet für uns.
Hört sich sehr schön an. Okay, also vielen Dank.
Ich danke dir und viele Grüße an alle, die das hier sehen.
Toll, Dankeschön.
Yeah, they knew I was filming them for to do a talk. So everybody, I told them all. Okay. So yeah, so all along the way, you see things that people have left there. Yeah. So these are all like little cards and pictures of people with things written on them. And I'll show you a couple close-ups as well. So a lot of people, still today, they'll do this in memory of, people they've lost, people they still love. Yeah. Okay. So this one says in Spanish, your husbands and kids haven't forgotten you. Lauren, forgive me. So my wife is actually watching tonight. I should probably say that to her as well. So bad husband. Yes? Okay, so when I took this picture, this was 2015. So here there was a card that just said, "We wait and hope for the liberation of Father Paolo D'Olio, kidnapped in Syria." So this was at the, I guess, the Syrian war still going on, kind of when it was first at its height back in 2013. Yeah, and these are just examples of thousands of these things that you see, but you find yourself stopping and just reading them. You have the time to do it. Yeah. Okay. So people leave little bits of life wisdom. For example, golf life. Yeah. And then I thought this one was interesting. So this is an old, I guess what we call in English, mile marker that somebody has painted the Camino way markers on. And there was actually a note there. I don't know if you can see that. You see that? It says, Abner Norman, estoy aquí. So Abner Norman was here. I wonder who left that. Okay, so here's a little bit of the countryside. So I can hear the wind coming through on my end. I hope you can too. So for me, a lot of these spaces look a lot like parts of Oklahoma and hill country in Texas, southern Colorado. But the architecture is a lot prettier and the arrangements of the fields and things like that. But it's only the country is kind of a lot alike. Yeah, pretty dry. Once you get out of the mountains near the Pyrenees. Yeah, you do see people. You see pilgrims. Again, this isn't a wilderness route. The difference between walking through the country outside in Europe now and in the Middle Ages is just like here in the United States. In the past 100 years, most agricultural work has become automated. So we only need about maybe 10% as many people to work the land as before. So if you will, like in the Middle Ages, I think sometimes we have this idea that Europe wasn't really that highly populated. That's true for the cities, but the countryside would have been maybe like, you probably would have seen about 10 times as many people out on the land as you would today. So as a pilgrim today, you probably have a lot more time for solitude than you would actually in that time period. Okay, and a lot of us are fans of urban art these days. There's fantastic graffiti everywhere. I thought the Sphinx was interesting. And I don't think we'll do this one. So, well, let me just see. I can only see a few of you. This is describing breakfast. Does anybody actually want to listen to this one? I can see hands go up. Okay, I'll play that. Yeah, I'll mention this before I start too. So, again, you're in hiking clothes when you're doing this. And even if you do it like on a tour bus or something like that, most people don't take that much stuff because, a lot of times you're just going through the country and it's like, why get dressed up if you're going to Holdenville? Yeah. You just take simple things along with you. But nevertheless, Spain, of course, is one of the great food countries of Europe. And even in the rural, okay, so in all like the bigger towns with more than a couple thousand people, you can get great food. But even in like the smaller places you pass through, breakfast and lunch are actually great. Like the really basic stuff is great. And it's really inexpensive. So I imagine even if you did like a tour or you put together your own sort of trip where you were actually staying in hotels and stuff like that, this is like the least expensive trip you could ever think about taking. So a ticket to Spain or Portugal, whenever that becomes possible for us as Americans again to do, that's the least expensive destination in all of Europe. So typically a ticket isn't going to cost you more than $1,200. $1,000 is the typical price. If you go in the off season, it's about $800, and that's really the only great expense you are going to have if you go to see the Camino. So food is really expensive, and when we get to talking about lodging, that's really inexpensive too. And you can't carry anything with you, so you don't buy anything. So I actually spent a lot less time on these 2 months when I was in Spain even including the air ticket, than I would if I had stayed here in Norman. And here in Norman, I'm always buying stuff and fixing up our house in the summertime. So I actually saved money doing this. Okay, so here's breakfast.
So it's about 9:30 in the morning, and I've actually just stopped. I've come into a larger sized town, and I'm having breakfast. This is my second breakfast, and usually I think it's a good idea to eat a lot of calories in the morning. The breakfast and bar food in the morning and for lunch is pretty good. It's pretty inexpensive. Lots of fresh bread. So I'll just show you here what I'm having, if I can. Okay, we'll go like this and come around. Okay, and behind me you can see my breakfast. And very typical is the coffee. It's just café con leche. This is what we in the United States usually call a café au lait, half espresso and half warm milk. So you'll become very familiar with that if you do the Camino. And I'm also having huevos fritos. This is fried eggs and chorizo, and this is the Spanish sausage, and it's a specialty of the region I'm in.
Yeah, different than Mexican chorizo.
And you also see the fresh bread behind, which is also pretty typical with most meals. And this is essentially what we call French bread, and it's pretty good in Spain also. Okay.
Yeah, so in non-COVID days, and the last time I gave this talk, whenever anybody talks about the Camino, lots of backpackers come. So that's what the practical tips are kind of for. Okay. Okay, and this is just some more food. So when I did the part by myself, I don't like to eat alone. So when I ate alone, I just bought stuff out of convenience stores. So again, if you're like on a budget, if you want to save money, you can just get cheap stuff essentially out of places like 7-Eleven. Yeah, the shadows are great. You know, Spain is actually pretty high up in the north. It's just warm because of the Gulf Stream, but the sun shines really horizontally in the morning. Yeah, so this was a big monastery before. Now it's just a little cell, but it's really surprising how many of the original buildings are still there on the Camino de Santiago. And I think we're fortunate that the Camino just basically slept for centuries. No one cared about it. So the buildings, they kind of got dilapidated, but they were easy to restore when the Spanish government actually did decide to restore them. Okay, so the next clip I show you is actually going to be inside this building. So I was by myself. I was thinking, oh, that building is like so cool. So I walked around the front, and it's an historical monument, and it had a cage in front of it. And I woke up this guy who was in the cage. I started taking a picture, and he woke up. So we're going to meet with him. And the sound on this one's not so good.
Goedemorgen, wij zijn in San Felices de Oca in Castilla. Hier is een man van het Nederland. En hoe heet je? Luis van Herder. Van wanneer in het Nederland? Delft. Ja, ik ben ingenieur in Delft. Ja? Ja? De Delftse Bijbel, dat is de eerste Bijbel. Ja. En in Amerika, wij kennen Dolf van het porcelain. Ja, ja.
Dat is trouwens oorspronkelijk Chinees, maar ja.
Ja, dus gegund. En Rick, wat heb je hier gemaakt?
Ja, dus ik was gewoon op zoek naar een plek om een beetje alleen te kunnen slapen. Dus ik was dus heel gek die op werk is, die herberg nog steeds om 8 uur wordt weer aangesproken.
Ja, en veel mensen.
Ja, veel mensen bij elkaar en gewoon.
Ja, ik vind dat hier heel mooi. En Rick, waarom mag je het Jacobweg?
Om mezelf te vinden, denk ik. Om God te zoeken. Ja, maar ook gewoon om te genieten van de natuur.
Ja.
Kerken, van kunst. Om mensen te ontmoeten.
Mensen gaan ja, de leunen. Ja. Ja. Heel veel dank, Rick.
Dat is het.
Ja, heel veel dank. Ja. Oké. So tot ziens.
Ja, tot ziens. Ja.
Okay, so it seems like people like to hear about food, so we'll do another food.
So it's 12 o'clock, and I'm in the middle of my walk for today, and I'm stopping for lunch. And as you can see, I'm having my first beer of the day, and I'm in wine country right now. It's not Rioja, but the beer sure goes well on a hot day's walk. And the beer in Spain is really pretty good. This is San Miguel. It's probably the worst of all though, but nevertheless very refreshing. And what else do we have here? We have una tortilla, and I guess we would call this in English a Spanish omelet, and it's potatoes and eggs, and very, very good, usually warm, lots of calories, and it's really more a typical breakfast.
Okay, that's breakfast number 2. So let's meet another pilgrim right now.
Yeah, so we're in San Juan de Ortega right now, and so we have another Camino walker here, and can I ask you what your name is?
Yeah, my name's James Kenyon.
And James, where are you from?
I'm from Manchester, England.
Manchester, England, okay. And can you tell us why you're doing Camino?
I didn't have a particular reason to begin with. Once I realised I had a long summer, I needed something to fill it. And at the time I had getting back from India, this seemed like the right thing to do. But coming on it now, I'm one of those people who kind of knows what they want to do the rest of their life, and I don't need to figure anything out. But coming here is...
There you go, yeah.
It helped me think about my trip to India, just thinking through. The sun always helps as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And we've got them a lot of sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you probably can't see, but James is wearing large sunglasses, and he's getting the raccoon eyes.
No, I'm not yet. I will be in a few days, trust me.
Like all of us. Okay, thanks, James.
Thank you.
Yeah, so everybody who does this gets this really crazy tan. Yeah, so most people are wearing sunglasses. So as soon as you take them off, you have like white goggles, and everybody is walking east to west. So everybody is like sunburned and tanned on the backside of their legs and arms. So people end up looking like creamsicles. Okay, so in the Middle Ages, of course, so if you were on a pilgrimage, I mean, sort of theoretically, everybody would be kind of the same, but of course, that's not true, at least as I would imagine it. If you had more money, you would get better accommodations. You could afford whatever they had for security. But, you know, even if you were wealthy, the chances of getting sick were great in the Middle Ages, of course. So people would pass away, have serious accidents on these trips. Today, as well, I mean, thousands of people, I don't know, probably in pre-COVID times, maybe 100 people walk this route every year. So people do have accidents. And And you do see memorials all along the way, especially for people who have had heart attacks. So some people do pass away doing this. And here we have one from a Japanese pilgrim that it looks like probably Spanish friends, people that he met along the way, put that up for him. Yeah. So yeah, I just practical advice. If you do want to undertake this, there's a real tendency, I think, for a lot of people to want to finish things and complete things and do every little step. But these pilgrimage routes, they're really more kind of about discovering yourself and getting something out of it. So for everybody, it's best just to take your time and not wear yourself out. And when my wife Diana and I were walking this, there was one day that was all uphill. It was probably, I don't know, like 100 stories uphill, and right in front of us, a couple miles in front of us, a man in his 60s passed away from a heart attack. Huh? So there are cabs and there are buses and there is rest, so you can do that.
So it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I decided to walk a little bit later today because the weather is pretty cool. It's only about 85 degrees. And if you're fortunate enough to have nice weather in the afternoon, you can walk all afternoon and get to the hostel about anytime really up to about 7 o'clock at night. It's usually no problem finding a place to stay. I was in a bigger town, and generally I kind of like to stay in smaller places. So this town is called Ventosa, and I think it has a population of about 170 people. So the first thing I do when I get to the town is pull out my little guidebook. It's the Brierly guide that all the American speakers have, and see what he says about the albergues here. And then I go and pick one out, and it'll usually only be about 10 euros for a nice place, and that's about $12 a night. And I'll turn around and walk backwards here and give you all an idea of how nice the countryside is. Yeah, it's only 85 degrees. It's still pretty toasty. Okay, so we'll go into town now, and I'll sign off for now.
Yeah. Okay. So most people will stay in these hostels. So the walkers and people like riding their bike, we usually stay here. But most of the towns also have other places to stay, like hotels. Or private rooms. And these days, of course, there's Airbnb and all that kind of stuff. So if you get tired and staying in these places, you just treat yourself every few days to something a little bit nicer. And outside of a major city, you're in rural Spain. And again, even like a hotel is going to be pretty inexpensive. Okay, so these albergues, the hostels, the medieval hospitals, if you will, come in all shapes and sizes. So here's one with like 50 beds in a room. Yeah, it's not untypical at all. And they're all different prices too. So if you really hardly have any money at all, there's usually going to be one run by whatever village you're in, and it's going to be maybe like $7 a night. And like a really nice high-end one might be like $14, something like that. So for most people who are, out of college, for example, it's, no big expense at all to spring for the nicer albergue. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, they come in all different shapes. A lot of them are in historic buildings. So this one looks like it's in the cellar of an old church. Lots of times they'll have all different numbers of beds to a room. Sometimes it might cost you like an extra $1 or $2 to stay in a room that only has 2 beds or 4 beds or something like that. Okay, and a lot of the albergues also offer meals. Most of them will have breakfast if you want them, and quite a few of them, probably half of them offer meals at night. They call them pilgrims meals, and these are just a great chance to sit around and talk with other people who are on pilgrimage. The food is usually not that great. So yeah, so when I did this with my wife, we went to a couple of them, and they were fantastic. But most nights we would just go out on our own to like an inn or a bar or something like that, where the food was like a whole lot better. Okay. Yeah, just a little more walking. This is your escape out of Norman and out of Oklahoma for just a little bit. So when we plan to do this this presentation as part of the Zoom lecture series, we were actually hoping that people would think about going here over the summer. But I guess it's not going to happen this year. It'll be there for us next summer, though. Yeah, and I feel so sorry for all the people who make their living from the Camino because they're just not bringing any money right now. Spaniards, the natives, quite a few of them walk this as well, but you know that's probably only going to be maybe 20% of the traffic along the Camino. Okay, so now we're entering another state, and this is Castilla-León, and it's here in the red. This is a really large state as well. Okay, so we're going to listen to a pilgrim I kept on meeting along the way, and he is actually Spanish. So I'm guessing probably like a third of us have had Spanish at some time in school, and you'll hear that his Spanish sounds a little bit different than the more American Spanish we speak here, but I would say if you have a little bit of Spanish, you're not going to have any trouble actually understanding the Spaniards. It's roughly equivalent to the difference between like American English and London English, the Queen's English. So the accent is a little bit different, but it's very, very clear. And people are patient and nice as well. So they'll slow down. Like all Spanish speakers, they speak really quickly. That doesn't sound good, but it's kind of true. If you're not a native Spanish speaker, Spanish always sounds really, really fast.
Sí, nosotros están entre Burgos y un pueblo de Tardajos y es un amigo del camino de mío y ¿cómo te llamas?
Pues yo me llamo Blas, soy español, no de aquí, sino del sur de España, de
cuál ciudad?
Es una región que se llama La Mancha,
¿Así?
en el sur de España. Ahora, un camino.
¿Y por qué haces el camino?
Pues los últimos 2 años he estado viviendo en Estados Unidos, enseñando español, muy lejos de mi país.
¿Dónde?
En California, San Diego. Y me pareció una buena idea cuando volviera a mi país hacer esta ruta para reencontrarme con los paisajes de mi país y conmigo mismo estando otra vez aquí. Entonces, es una experiencia personal, pero también experiencia de superación personal y de poder hacer este esfuerzo físico y mental, de poder aguantar las semanas de camino. Pero también es un camino, pero también es un reencuentro con mi país y con mi idioma y con mi gente.
Y con los extranjeros.
Y de paso lo que
todo el mundo.
Sí, lo que encuentro es un camino. Me encuentro con mi país, es un sitio internacional, un sitio de camino, de muchas culturas, de muchos idiomas, y que entre todos existe ese espíritu de solidaridad que parece utópico, pero que es verdad. Aquí hay una mezcla de orígenes, de idiomas, de gente que nos demuestran que somos todos muy parecidos.
Sí, y tu país es un país muy bonito. ¿Has encontrado en el camino por la primera vez?
Sí, bueno, ya sabía que era un país bonito, pero lo que he encontrado es muchas ciudades que no conocía, porque conocía mucho el sur de España, pero no el norte. Y sí he encontrado paisajes muy distintos, y más que nos queda por ver cuando lleguemos a León y Galicia. Y es un país muy diverso en lo geográfico y también en lo humano.
Sí. Muchas gracias, y yo debería decir que Blas es un hombre muy simpático, y yo he visto a Blas muchas veces en el camino.
Sí, nos hemos encontrado en muchos sitios distintos a lo largo de muchos días.
Yeah, so you're always seeing people over and over again, which is really cool, and it just kind of depends on how quickly people walk. So lots of people will try to race through it, and then they mess up their feet and they got to take a couple days off, so you just end up seeing them again. But I think his conversation is kind of interesting. You know, he's seeing his country kind of for the first times in some ways, and I think this is so similar for everybody from every place. Lots of times we haven't traveled around our own countries a whole lot. Okay, so just really quickly again, this is the area that we're in right now. We're almost at the end of the pilgrimage route. This is Castilla y León, and a lot of this country is very hot and it's very flat. So for most of the people that walk the Camino, this is their least favorite part of the Camino. They think the countryside is not as interesting looking, and they just kind of run out of steam because it's a little monotonous. And again, in the summertime too, when most of us have vacation and can do this, it just gets really, really hot. But being Oklahomans, my wife and I actually no problem at all with the heat. It was actually kind of really nice. And we actually found this area beautiful. And when we were there, I think it was June, and all the field flowers were actually out. Yeah. So this is a pretty typical field of poppies all over the place. We saw that. Yeah. So this is Diana. She's my wife. We'll see her again actually here in a minute. Yeah. So she actually started out the first week having foot problems and everything else, just like all the other pilgrims. So the first few days were tough for her, but like everybody, she kind of got over it. You get better. Your body gets tough very quickly. Okay, and this is just very typical of this part of the country, kind of flat. Again, it feels a lot like Kansas or southern Colorado or even Oklahoma, which means the skies are beautiful in the morning and at the night, especially if you get some clouds. This is a pretty typical church, actually, in a smaller town. So windows are small. I'd imagine to keep the temperature down. If you can get into these churches, it's always very surprising how beautiful the art is, how rich it is, and how much money it probably costs. And I'm no expert on this, but I can only presume that these small towns have such really valuable artistic treasures because of the history of colonialism and Spain exploiting the Americas for several hundred years and taking out their golds and all that kind of stuff. And of course, that's part of all of European civilization and North American civilization these days too. But the good part about that is we do have these beautiful works of art. So at least one positive thing came out of colonialism. Okay, all right. All right, so we're proceeding along the route and we are almost there. So we're entering the final region of Spain. This is Galicia, yeah, right up here above Portugal, and Santiago de Compostela is pretty central within it. Okay, so we're going to see just a few slides of going through Galicia. Okay, so if you remember the state we were just in, Castilla y León, very dry, very hot, kind of like Kansas or Oklahoma in the summer. As soon as you get into Galicia, you are in a coastal region again. And it's a lot like a lot of the Celtic lands, actually, like Britain, UK, Ireland, or the coast of France in some ways. So very, very lush, very green, just absolutely beautiful. So I wrote up here Ireland with mountains. So if you've ever been to Ireland, I think this is a pretty good approximation of what the geography is like there. Yeah. Very hilly, very mountainous, but really, really lush. And there are little roads, pathways carved through all this lushness. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was in The Hobbit. I felt like I was in the Shire. Yeah. So you're surrounded by circles of vegetation and all these like little tunnels made out of trees and bushes and things like that. Okay, so here we are at the top of one of the mountains in Galicia, and you go through several mountain ranges on the Camino, actually. And the other thing I would say about Galicia too, so the material goal, if you will, of completing the Camino is getting a certificate to say that you did the pilgrimage. And everybody that goes along the pilgrimage carries a little passport, and they put a stamp in every town you go through to say where you've been. And if you're thinking about doing this, you can just order it ahead of time online, or you can buy it actually when you start the Camino, wherever you do that. to get this thing, this credential, this little certificate in Santiago that says that you did the Camino, all you need to have done is the last 100 kilometers of the Camino. Yeah. So this is 60 miles. It's not really that much. So a lot of people will do that. I mean, not everybody has like a month to do a longer walk. Some people don't have such great mobility. So, you know, they'll just do like a few miles at a time. I don't think that nobody really checks to make sure you've actually walked. You can probably just ride a bike and get the stamp, that kind of thing. But what that does kind of mean is like, especially like about the last 60 miles, 100 miles are pretty crowded. Yeah. So through most of the trip, you can have your solitude, but the last little bit, you do see lots and lots of people, and sometimes the inn is full when you get there. Okay, so this area is, again, it's called Galicia. It is one of the states in Spain, and all these states are pretty autonomous. They're very federated. They kind of run themselves, but there's still a lot of nationalism in some of these areas in Spain, especially the ones that are doing economically very well. So we all know, like in the past few years, Catalonia, which has Barcelona as its capital, wanted to succeed from Spain. Catalonia is doing really well economically. They're not too crazy about, you know, paying their taxes into the Spanish national government. And you have a little bit of nationalism here in Galicia as well. And way back when, back before the year 1000, in Galicia, they actually spoke a Celtic language. So in the age of nationalism, back in the 19th century, especially when people all over Europe were trying to get reconnected with their original language and roots and all that kind of stuff, ever since then, Galicia has kind of asserted this Celtic identity. So I'm not going to show you any films of this, but like along the way here, there were people playing bagpipes. There were King Arthur pubs and restaurants and stuff. So they very much embraced their Celticness. Yeah. But that language, their Celtic language, died probably about the year 800. The variety, I'm going to say variety of Spanish, is really not. The variety of Spanish that they speak there today is actually closer to Portuguese than the kind of Spanish that's spoken in Madrid. So here's a little bit of very lightweight nationalism that I thought is kind of cool. So this is a sign to a town. And in Spanish, it's las, like the, herrerías with the H in the front. Okay, but in this language Gallego, which is like Portuguese, the L falls away, and H's become F's. So somebody put that there. So that's for the language geeks. For me, that was like really cool. Okay, this one here, we're almost at the end. This one here, I forgot to subtitle it, but what's going on here is, so we've been walking for about almost a month, my wife Diana and I, and we have reached a mile marker that says 100 kilometers to Santiago de Compostela. So for all the pilgrims, this is a really, really big deal. And like I was saying before, you keep on running into some of the same people, and the stars aligned this day. When we got there and we stopped, we ran into about 3 groups of people who were like the groups of people, like the couples that we had seen the most along the way. Yeah. Okay. So it's about 5 minutes, but you can kind of see the joy that that people have. It's me practicing my crappy Spanish. Oh, I can't say that on a Zoom recording. Me practicing my bad Spanish.
Kilómetro 100 y ahora mi esposa Diana toca fotos de los caminantes. Es un punto de más importancia. Ahí, Diana, y aquellos son peregrinos.
And
pasamos mucho tiempo aquí. So, Pues es el fin de esta parte y ahora mismo tenemos dos amiguitas mejores, nuestras dos amiguitas mejores. Es la Krista.
Hola.
Y es la Rosalie.
Hola. Hola.
Sí, son de Nuevo México.
Oh, sí,
Sí. Más de esas damas más tarde. Y ahora mismo tenemos los otros amigos del camino. Y el señor allí en la camiseta amarilla.
Pero no es problema, el marco está ahí. El marco
de Brasil. Y la esposa sua.
Lucy.
Sí, es la Lucy.
João Carlos,
Sim.
JC.
Sim.
Abraço grande do Brasil para vocês, cheio de amor e de carinho.
Sí, que JC dice.
A huge hug for all of you with tenderness, with careness, and with joy.
Muchas gracias, JC. Pues es todo por ahora mismo.
Okay. Yeah. So one of those people actually was the Rosalie from New Mexico. She actually loved this part of the Iberian Peninsula so much that she decided to retire there. So she actually is, so she moved to Portugal about 2 years ago. I think it's just easier actually to move to Portugal than Spain for foreigners. But I tell you what, I'm not surprised that she kind of fell in love with this part of the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, so we're coming up to the very last slide, and this is us coming into Santiago, the main square in front of the cathedral in Santiago. Oh, actually, this is the second to last slide we're coming up on. Okay, but we are coming into the main square in front of the Cathedral de Santiago. So this is the end destination, and my wife was actually nice enough. I actually didn't talk to her about for this iteration of the talk, but I assume it's okay. She was nice enough the last time I gave this talk to let me actually show this slide. So she gets kind of emotional. Everybody does. Okay, so she's really typical here. So thank you, Diana, for letting me do this, although I might have to pay for it later. And I'm going to show this even though I say something which is kind of sexist. So when I took this movie, I took it for her and me, not for anybody else. So I say something which I would never say in public, but I guess it's public now. I promise you I don't say things like that too often. Okay. Whoops. And that shell, everybody carries those on pilgrimage. Yeah.
Laughing, crying at the same time. I think I'm married to a woman. Okay, and that sounds bad. Some things are universal truths.
Yeah, so it's a huge thing. This is what people are thinking about the whole time along this trail, and it's a really difficult walk for a lot of people as well. Okay, so you come in and you reach the destination, and hopefully you've traversed that last 100 kilometers, and you go to an office that the Catholic Church has set up there, and you show them your little passport with all the stamps from all the places you've been, and they give you a credential, which I should have looked for. I've got it here somewhere to say that you've done it. So most people will stay on an extra day. So that's kind of the first culmination of this thing, is actually reaching the place and getting your credential, standing in line in a very bureaucratic way behind everybody else to get the certificate. The other thing is, after you've had a chance to relax, and most people go to a decent hotel, is on the next morning, people will go to a mass for the pilgrims, and these happen most mornings, just to kind of mark the end of the journey. Yeah. And again, I mean, people from all sorts of faith traditions do the Camino, and people who are nothing, agnostics, but everybody goes to this mass, this part of doing it. Okay, so this is just going to show going into this cathedral. It's a Romanesque cathedral, and we're actually not going to see the mass, but we'll just kind of see up to the beginning of it. Whoops.
It's Sunday morning, and we are about to attend the Pilgrim's Mass. I'm walking up the steps leading to one of the portals of the church. This must be the south portal. And we can see we have two Romanesque doors in the portal. I should know this, they're probably mid-12th century. And we're following the pilgrims into the church. For the Pilgrim's Mass, which starts at 12 o'clock, it's 1 hour from now, but it's about to go up quickly. And in we go, and the inside of the church is totally Romanesque. The largest Romanesque church that certainly I've ever seen. And I'm the last in our little group of about 6 people. And we are in one of the transepts, and this is just a side nave, and we'll go here to the main nave, and we'll take a look down it. And we can see the immense size. And to the right is the altar in gold, and it is in the center nave. And we'll just pan around. You can see on the other side aisles, the nave itself. And you can see Diana waving at me in the distance as the church moves up. And that's all.
And that was it. So if you have any comments, I know it's late. Everybody's hung on for a long time, but I didn't have any place better to be, so I'm happy to spend the evening with you.
Hey, Joe, thank you so much. This is Carrie and Candace.
Hi, good to see you.
This was just such a delightful tour.
Yes.
You made it so personal. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. My pleasure.
I was just thinking my feet would never hold up to this trip, so I'm glad I got to enjoy it vicariously with you.
Yeah, it's tough on feet. So everybody goes into this thinking they're going to have plenty of time to train for it. And, you know, most people who like undertake pilgrimages are like us. They definitely are professional people or university students, and we're busy and we work. So most people actually hit the trail, not really having done like nearly even a quarter of the training they need to do. So the first week is really tough on feet. I've seen enough blisters to last a lifetime. Hi, Lynn. You're muted. Lynn, you're muted.
Thanks, Joe. Sorry. That's as close as I'll ever get to Santiago, and I appreciated it.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, I kept on saying this, but you know, we just say again, you don't have to walk this. This would be a great place just to, you know, to go doing like the normal way people do vacations. You can do it in a car. Yeah, lots of people do it in a car. So you'll know, a lot of you know Steve Law, for example, from he was at UCO. So he and his wife, as I remember it, they did it with a car and they had a tent. But this is the civilized, you know, this is Spain. So you don't have to walk if you don't want to.
See you.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
I just wanted to say thank you for this talk. I'm an assistant professor of French up at UCO, and it's been a lifelong. Hi. I'm co-sponsoring the Medieval Society now.
Great.
With Reid Weber. So it's been a dream of mine for years, actually, since when I lived in Paris. One of my friends did the Camino with only one leg, actually, and on crutches. It was incredible, and I've wanted to do it ever since then. So having this like specifically medieval, you know, approach to I mean, this is just amazing. I just thank you so much for this talk. This is really cool.
I'm sure you know that people start in France as well. Yes. What is it? The Vézelay, I think, is the big place to start in France, I guess. But you can start from lots of different places in France.
A lot start where you did too. So
yeah, I actually the last portion I did, I had actually wanted to start in France, but I'm going to blame OU. It had something to do with our new travel system, and I just couldn't work out the ticket to get back to Europe early enough. But I was going to start in the middle of France.
We have a couple professors that, when times are good, do a study tour that goes from France to Spain, and they walk the first day of the Camino together, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, every once in a while I see professors. We saw a few professors along the way doing that as well. So I was just thinking they have their work cut out for them. They're taking care of a lot of feet.
Well, thank you.
Well, I'd like to mention that I was at a conference in Santiago a long time ago.
So Joyce, can you get closer to your microphone or turn up your volume?
Can you hear me? Turn up my volume. Can you hear me? No?
I can hear you a little bit. Go ahead. I think I can hear you, and I'll just repeat what you say. Nope. Well, I did get that you were at a conference in Santiago. Yeah, so I would just add too, so Santiago is actually a beautiful city, and I don't think too many people actually go there as like a single destination. It seems like most people who go there actually do it in connection with the Camino, but I think it would be a fantastic place to go just to spend a week all by itself. Yeah. Really great food, beautiful architecture. The people are very friendly.
Yeah, I've been there. It's a beautiful place and really neat.
Yeah. So when we were there, we had to leave like a day later, but my thought was, oh, why didn't we plan to stay here 3 days or 4 days or something like that? So.
Can you hear me now?
Joe, may I ask you something?
Yeah, of course, Roberto.
I was sleeping like in these big rooms after a day. I mean, you walked for the whole day, you were exhausted. Of course, I mean, everybody maybe didn't take a shower the same day. I was sleeping like in this big albergue, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
I was staying like in this big room.
That's a great question. So my wife, Diana, is in another room listening to this, and she's laughing. Yeah. So, okay. So
Hi, Diana.
Yeah. So for the most part, you're so exhausted. So like anybody can walk like one day. Yeah. But when you do it like days in a row, you just get really, yeah, there she is. You tend to get really, really tired about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So like on a typical night, you're going to sleep like a baby. But I would say like for most people, it's like Russian roulette. There will be on that 6th night, the bullet will be in the gun and something will wake you up after you've fallen asleep. And it'll usually be somebody snoring and you won't sleep all night. So I'll tell you a couple bad things. Oh, I won't tell Diana's story. I'll tell mine. So one night towards the end, I was in a room with about 30 people, and I usually sleep like a baby. This one night, I slept next to this guy who had like the worst snore ever. He snored all night. I got like 1 hour of sleep. So I left him a note the next day that said something like, "Do you know that you snore? You should turn over on your side," or I forget what I say, because I was just so cranky. And of course, 2 hours later, I'm like, I should not have done that. That's terrible, especially for a pilgrim. I still feel bad about it. Like, quite honestly, I should not have done that. But yeah, it's gonna be pretty tough. But accommodation is pretty inexpensive. So for not a lot more, you can usually get a room with just like 2 beds or 1 bed, or go to a hotel or something like that. But it's a weird experience. And it's men and women are almost always together, unless you're staying at a convent. And lots of times, so you can stay at like religious institutions too. And sometimes they'll separate like unmarried people. Like they separated Diana and me because they thought we were unmarried because she has a different last name. We were in different rooms. So it's a lot of people running around in their underwear sometimes. So there's not like a ton of privacy, but everybody's kind of dirty and in the same, in the same thing. So yeah, it's kind of okay. It's sort of like camping. Like Diana, I'm not going to tell your story. So, oh, okay. So one night after we had a really big meal, Diana and I were in a room with maybe about 40 people, and she was next to a snorer, and he kept her up all night. So the next day, she was really, really cranky, yeah, and tired, and kind of almost like whiny. So this was in a pretty large town. I can't remember where it was, but the walk after that was one of these uphill walks. So it was like a really demanding walk, and we finished it. We were in a little place. There were only a couple places to stay, and we picked one, and we walk into a room. It has like 6 beds, and guess who is in the bed next to Diana? It was the snorer from the night before. So she had a meltdown.
It's because you didn't leave a note, Diana.
No, but she kind of had a meltdown and stuff. And the owner of the hostel was like, "Oh, is she okay? Is she okay?" But she was fine. She fell right asleep. Yeah, because we're so tired. Yeah.
I had headphones.
Oh, headphones. Yeah. And the next day, everything is fine. You get a good night's sleep. But
God, it was horrible.
yeah. But yeah, it's something else sleeping in like little places. Yeah. But if this is something you want to do by yourselves, the guides are pretty good. So it was 2016 when I did this last. We were still using paper for the most part. And even then with the paper guides, you could find whatever kind of accommodation you wanted. And now, I mean, really everything is online. And especially if you know a Romance language, you can read the Spanish sites, and they're going to tell you like where you can get the room, the really cheap accommodation with like 1 bed or 2 beds in a room. It's really not roughing it.
I have a question. Do people do this year round? And what is the climate like, or the weather like in the wintertime?
Yeah, you can, but it does get cold in the winter. So, probably about 3/4 of the hostels will close in the wintertime. And obviously I say obviously, but you bring your own sleeping gear with you for the most part. You'll usually have blankets. So if you do it in the winter, you're going to be carrying more gear. It rains a lot up there, so kind of turns into a climate a little bit like England. I think. Not really freezing in most of these areas unless you're like in the mountainous areas. So people do it, but not too many people. So the real prime times to do it are actually in like September and October, and like April, May, and June. This is actually when the weather is the best for most people. But I say that, I think for any of us who live out in this part of the country, like the hot weather is just like nothing for us. I think it didn't bother me at all. So generally, you'll hear people recommend that you don't go in August and the end of July, but I think I actually walked part of it. I think it was in July. And again, as Oklahoma, somebody lives in Oklahoma, yeah, it wasn't bad at all. And you can stop walking at like 10 o'clock in the morning if you want to, or 11 o'clock. Yeah. But yeah, so it's the north of Spain, you know, it's not the hottest region or whatever. So in the summertime, if it's a hot summer, it might get up to 90. But the difference is that most places aren't going to have air conditioning. So hence the siesta. So there's not a lot going on in the smaller places. In the afternoon, everybody's just done, and they're either at home or they're in a cafe or a bar, which I thought was great. Okay, so hopefully we'll get out of quarantine one of these days. It's really something worth doing, yeah. And everybody's here because we love like the Middle Ages and early modern period and stuff like that. It's like right up our alley. And most of us here actually are connected with academia. For us, it's good because it's really inexpensive as well. It's cheaper than going to Galveston. For real. Okay, thank you, everybody. Sorry about the password stuff. So, okay, everybody have a good weekend. Yeah. Thanks again.
Hey, Joe, we need to do the Via Francigena next.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do, actually. Yeah, I was going to do it, but so we have the Arthurian conference. We were supposed to